These mountains remember a world without bones. Before the dinosaurs walked the earth, before the first tree pushed its roots into soil, before Saturn wore its rings, these ridges were already old. The Appalachian Mountains, a 2,000-mile spine of forested peaks running from Alabama to Newfoundland. To most travelers, they look quiet, familiar, almost gentle. But geologists have confirmed something extraordinary. The rocks at the core of these mountains formed nearly 1.2 billion years ago. The range itself rose more than 480 million years ago. That makes them older than dinosaurs, older than trees, older than the rings of Saturn, older, quite literally, than bones themselves. And once, they were giants. Scientists have determined that the Appalachians once stood as tall as the Himalayas. What travelers see today is only the worn-down remnant of a colossal world. Within these ancient ridges lie hidden valleys, forgotten peoples, underground lakes, and landscapes so strange they look like another planet. There is a mountain canyon called the Grand Canyon of the East. There are wild ponies that roam above the clouds. There is a community of people whose origins puzzled historians for 2 centuries, until a DNA study finally revealed the truth. And there is a secret that connects these mountains to Scotland, to Morocco, to Scandinavia. This is the story of the oldest mountains in North America, the places most travelers never see, and the wonders hidden inside America's most ancient wilderness. To stand in the Appalachians is to stand on something almost incomprehensibly old. Geologists have traced the story carefully. About 1.2 billion years ago, when all the continents were still fused into one supercontinent, the rocks that form the core of these mountains were already taking shape. At that time, days on Earth were shorter than 24 hours. The atmosphere had no ozone layer, and complex life had not yet evolved. Then, around 480 million years ago, the mountains themselves began to rise. Continents collided, stone folded upon stone, and what would become the Appalachian Range pushed skyward. Researchers estimate the original peaks stood as tall as the modern Himalayas, some reaching 30,000 feet into the sky. But time has a way of humbling mountains. For hundreds of millions of years, wind, water, and ice did their patient work. The peaks eroded, the valleys deepened, the colossal giants slowly shrank into the rounded, forested ridges visible today. And yet the age of these mountains is exactly what makes them extraordinary. Because the Appalachians have stood undisturbed for so long, they hold one of the most biologically diverse temperate ecosystems on Earth. More species of salamanders live here than anywhere else on the planet. More tree species than all of Europe combined. What looks like an ordinary forest is, in truth, one of the most ancient living libraries on Earth. To understand these mountains, travelers must begin where the sky itself seems to breathe, where blue mist rises from the trees at dawn, in the most visited national park in all of America. There is a reason the Cherokee called these mountains Shekonahay, the place of blue smoke. Stretching across the border of Tennessee and North Carolina, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park covers more than 500,000 acres of ancient forest. It is the most visited national park in the United States, drawing over 12 million travelers each year. But what most visitors never realize is why the mountains actually appear blue. Scientists have explained the phenomenon. The trees of these forests release organic compounds into the air. Trillions of microscopic particles rise from the leaves and interact with sunlight, scattering blue wavelengths across the ridges. The mountains are not smoking. They are breathing. Within this park lie some of the most cinematic landscapes in eastern North America. Clingman's Dome rises to 6,643 feet, the highest point on the entire Appalachian Trail. On a clear day, travelers report being able to see across 7 states from its observation tower. Newfound Gap, sitting at 5,049 feet, marks the only place where the famous trail crosses a paved road. But the true treasure of the Smokies lies in its biodiversity. Researchers have documented more than 19,000 species inside the park, with scientists estimating that as many as 80,000 more remain undiscovered. It is the most biodiverse national park in America. The forest here holds 1,500 species of flowering plants. Black bears patrol the hollows. Elk, reintroduced in 2001, now roam freely. And in early summer, in only a handful of places on Earth, the synchronous fireflies of the Smokies blink in perfect unison, lighting the forest like a living constellation. But hidden inside this vast wilderness lies a valley frozen in time, a place where the stories of Cherokee hunters and Appalachian pioneers still echo across the meadows. Surrounded on all sides by ancient peaks, there is a valley that the world almost forgot. Cades Cove, a flat green basin nestled deep within the Smoky Mountains. To the casual visitor, it looks like a peaceful pastoral scene. Wooden churches, old log cabins, mist hanging low over open fields. But the story buried beneath this quiet landscape is far stranger than most travelers imagine. Geologists call Cades Cove a limestone window. Over hundreds of millions of years, erosion stripped away the harder Precambrian sandstone, exposing the softer Paleozoic limestone beneath. The result was a deep, fertile valley walled in by mountains, a natural fortress hidden inside the Smokies. Long before European settlers arrived, the Cherokee knew this place. They called it Siahi, meaning the place of the river otter. Researchers believe the valley served primarily as a Cherokee hunting ground, with seasonal camps and trails crossing through. The valley was even named for a Cherokee leader, Chief Cade. Everything changed in 1819. The Treaty of Calhoun ended Cherokee claims to the land. The first European settlers, John and Lucretia Oliver, arrived a year earlier and barely survived their first winter. Historians note that the Olivers lived only because local Cherokee gave them dried pumpkin to eat. By 1850, the population of Cades Cove had grown to nearly 685 people. They built grist mills, churches, smokehouses, and barns. Many of these structures still stand today, preserved as one of the largest open-air museums in any American national park. But the most surprising chapter came in the 1920s, when the United States government moved to create the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The residents of Cades Cove refused to leave. Threats were made, lawsuits were filed. One settler reportedly warned officials that if they returned, they would spend the next night in hell. Eventually, the land was taken by eminent domain. Cades Cove preserves the memory of pioneers and Cherokee alike. But high above the haze, in valleys even more remote, the Appalachians cradle wonders that defy belief. North of the Smokies, the Blue Ridge rises again, and here, along the spine of Virginia, lies a national park born from a remarkable act of restoration. Shenandoah National Park stretches for nearly 200,000 acres along the Blue Ridge, but unlike other great American parks, Shenandoah is not untouched wilderness. It is a wilderness reborn. In the early 1900s, the mountains here had been heavily logged, farmed, and grazed for generations. When the park was established in 1935, the United States government did something unprecedented. They purchased the land, relocated the residents, and allowed nature to slowly reclaim what had been lost. Today, more than 95% of Shenandoah is once again classified as forest. The wilderness returned. The park is famous for Skyline Drive, the legendary 105-mile scenic road that crests along the ridge from Front Royal to Rockfish Gap. From there, it links seamlessly to the Blue Ridge Parkway, the most visited unit in the entire National Park Service. Together, they form the longest scenic mountain drive in America. But Shenandoah is more than its road. Tucked into the folds of the park, rises Old Rag Mountain. At 3,284 feet, it is one of the most challenging and rewarding hikes in the eastern United States. The trail crosses a wild boulder scramble, where travelers must climb hand over hand across granite formations more than 1 billion years old. Just beyond the park lies Luray Caverns. Discovered in 1878, it is the largest cave system in the eastern United States, holding the famous Great Stalacpipe organ, an instrument that produces music by gently striking ancient stalactites tuned over decades. And in autumn, when the Blue Ridge erupts into red, gold, and amber, Shenandoah becomes one of the most photographed landscapes on Earth. But the deepest secrets of these mountains are not found above the surface. To witness one of the most astonishing wonders of Appalachia, travelers must descend into the dark, into the silence, into a place hidden 140 feet beneath the earth. Beneath the town of Sweetwater, Tennessee, far below the rolling forests of the southern Appalachians, lies one of the most extraordinary geological secrets in the United States. The Lost Sea, a vast underground lake, hidden 140 feet beneath the surface, inside the ancient Craighead Caverns, officially recognized as the largest underground lake in the United States and the second largest in the world. The cave system stretches far beyond what divers have been able to map. Researchers have explored more than 13 acres of water so far, descending into chambers that drop deeper than any diver has ever reached. The true size of the Lost Sea remains unknown to this day. But the lake is only the beginning of the mystery. Long before the United States existed, the Cherokee used these caves. Inside Craighead Caverns, explorers have discovered pottery shards, weapons and arrowheads belonging to ancient Cherokee tribes. They came here to hunt, to gather minerals, and possibly to hide. Even older traces have been found. Deep within the caverns, paleontologists uncovered the fossilized remains of a prehistoric jaguar. The animal had wandered into the dark thousands of years ago and never escaped. Its bones remain preserved in the cave today. In the 1800s, the caverns served Confederate soldiers during the American Civil War. They harvested saltpeter from the cave walls to make gunpowder. Later, in the early 20th century, locals turned a large dry chamber called the council room into a secret moonshine still and even an underground dance hall. Couples reportedly danced beneath stalactites by lantern light. Today, travelers can ride glass-bottom boats across the silent waters. The lake is utterly still. The air is cold. The walls are streaked with rare cave formations called anthodites, sometimes called cave flowers, found in only a few places on Earth. But while the Lost Sea reveals what lies hidden below, another wonder of the Appalachians reaches in the opposite direction, plunging deeper than almost anyone expects, a canyon that earned a name reserved only for the West. In the high country of North Carolina, the earth splits open. This is Linville Gorge, the deepest canyon in the eastern United States, a 12-mile chasm cut so steeply into the Pisgah National Forest that even today much of its terrain remains unmapped on foot. Travelers and geologists call it the Grand Canyon of the East, and the comparison is not exaggeration. The walls of the gorge plunge nearly 2,000 feet to the Linville River below. On either side rise some of the most dramatic peaks in Appalachia: Hawksbill Mountain, Table Rock, the jagged formations known simply as the Chimneys. Geologists believe Linville Gorge was carved by an ancient phenomenon called stream capture. Researcher Brad Johnson of Davidson College discovered that millions of years ago, the Linville River suddenly redirected the flow of multiple smaller rivers. 3 times the original volume of water began rushing through the canyon, slicing through the quartzite rock with relentless force. But what makes Linville truly unique is what survived inside it. Because the gorge was too steep, too rocky, and too dangerous for loggers in the 1800s, the trees were never cut. Today, Linville Gorge holds one of the largest stands of old-growth forest in the eastern United States. Some of the trees have stood for more than 400 years, untouched by saw or axe. The history here is layered. The Cherokee used these ridges for thousands of years. The gorge itself was named after a frontiersman, William Linville, who was killed near the river in 1766. Today, archaeologists from Appalachian State University continue uncovering Cherokee and Catawba sites hidden in the wilderness. For travelers, Wiseman's View remains the most accessible overlook. At sunrise, the entire gorge fills with golden mist, the cliffs glowing above the river far below. Free camping is available, but permits are required on weekends from May through October. But Linville cuts downward into the earth. To witness another Appalachian wonder, travelers must look upward, toward an open mountain world where wild ponies still roam free above the clouds. Few travelers expect to find wild ponies in the United States, and fewer still expect to find them grazing at over 5,000 feet, where the trees thin out and the sky opens wide. But high in southwestern Virginia, on a windswept plateau called the Grayson Highlands, this strange and wonderful sight is real. The Grayson Highlands State Park spans more than 4,800 acres along the slopes of Mount Rogers, the highest peak in Virginia at 5,729 feet. Up here, the landscape transforms. The dense Appalachian forest gives way to open grassy meadows known as balds. These rare ecosystems, found only in the southern Appalachians, are part grassland, part alpine tundra. Scientists still debate how they formed. To prevent the forest from reclaiming the balds, wildlife managers introduced a herd of wild ponies in 1974. The herd has roamed freely ever since. Today, between 100 and 150 ponies live across the highlands, grazing the meadows and shaping the landscape with every hoofprint. Travelers report seeing them most often in early summer and autumn. The ponies are accustomed to humans but remain genuinely wild. Park rangers ask hikers to keep their distance and never feed them. The Appalachian Trail itself crosses directly through the highlands. Many through hikers describe the section between Massey Gap and Mount Rogers as the most magical day of their entire 2,200-mile journey. The trail passes between giant boulders, through fields of blueberries in late summer, and across exposed ridges with 360-degree views of 3 states. A few hours south, just across the border into Tennessee, lies another Appalachian wonder, Rowan Mountain. Every June, its high meadows erupt into the largest natural rhododendron garden in the world. Pink and purple flowers stretch across the balds for miles, transforming the mountaintop into something out of a dream. But the wild beauty of these highlands is only one piece of the Appalachian story. The most photographed point on the entire Appalachian Trail still waits to the north, carved into a cliff that hangs above the world. Of all the 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail, one rocky ledge stands above the rest. McAfee Knob, a sandstone outcrop rising 3,197 feet above the Catawba Valley of Virginia, the most photographed spot on the entire trail. Hikers who reach the summit describe stepping onto the edge of the world. The cliff juts out into open air, offering a 270-degree panoramic view of the Roanoke Valley to the east, Tinker Cliffs to the north, and North Mountain rolling endlessly to the west. The image of a hiker silhouetted on the knob has appeared in countless photographs, films, and documentaries. It is considered the iconic image of the Appalachian Trail itself. The hike to reach it is about 8 miles round trip. Travelers report it as one of the most rewarding day hikes in Eastern America. Beyond McAfee Knob, the famous Blue Ridge Parkway winds for 469 miles from Shenandoah National Park down to the Great Smoky Mountains. It is often called America's favorite drive. The parkway offers some of the finest mountain views in the country, but for those who want to truly experience it, separate journeys are needed for the scenic roads of the Appalachians. What matters here is the spine itself. The Blue Ridge runs as the eastern edge of the Appalachian Range, formed during the same continental collisions that built the entire chain. Beneath its forested slopes lie rocks that predate complex life on Earth. This is also the heart of Appalachian culture. Mountain music, quilt making, storytelling traditions passed down for centuries. But for all the beauty visible from these ridges, the deepest mystery of these mountains is not found in stone, or trees, or trails. It is found in the people, in a small group whose origins puzzled historians for over 200 years, a people who lived hidden in the highest hollows, a people called the Melungeons. In the remote ridges of the Tennessee-Virginia border, in valleys so steep and so isolated that few outsiders ever set foot inside them, lived a community that history could not explain. They called themselves Portuguese. Their neighbors called them something else entirely, Melungeons. For more than 200 years, historians, genealogists, and curious travelers tried to solve the mystery of who they were. The Melungeons had olive skin, dark hair, and European features. They lived in tight-knit communities scattered across Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, and parts of North Carolina. They did not match the racial categories of early America. They were not fully European, not fully African, not fully Native American. The theories were extraordinary. Some researchers suggested the Melungeons were descendants of Portuguese sailors shipwrecked along the American coast. Others believed they came from Turkish slaves abandoned by Sir Francis Drake. Still others proposed that they were the long-lost survivors of the Roanoke colony, the famous English settlement that vanished without a trace in 1590. Some genealogists even suggested ancient Welsh, Moorish, or Sephardic Jewish ancestry. The mystery endured because the Melungeons themselves rarely spoke about their origins. In a young America that enforced increasingly strict racial laws, claiming Portuguese heritage was a survival strategy. It allowed them to be recorded as white in censuses. It allowed them to own land. It allowed them to send their children to school. Then, in 2012, science finally answered the question. A peer-reviewed DNA study published in the Journal of Genetic Genealogy revealed the truth. The Melungeons were the descendants of unions between sub-Saharan African men and white women of northern or central European origin, most likely formed in colonial Virginia in the 1600s, before the hardening of America's racial laws. To survive, many of these families fled deep into the Appalachian Mountains, building hidden communities along Newman's Ridge and the high hollows of Hancock County. For generations, the Melungeons were the people no one could place. Today they are recognized as one of the earliest tri-ethnic American communities, a living testament to the complexity of the American story itself. And their ridgetops still rise quietly in eastern Tennessee, where the wind carries the memory of a people who hid in plain sight. The Appalachian Mountains were never just a barrier, they were also a doorway. And for centuries, the entire story of America passed through two of the most extraordinary gateways in the range. The first lies where two rivers meet. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. A historic town built at the dramatic confluence of the Potomac and the Shenandoah rivers, surrounded by 3 states, 3 mountain ridges, and over 22 miles of hiking trails inside the National Historical Park. Thomas Jefferson stood on a stone overlook here in 1783. Today, that overlook is called Jefferson Rock. He famously wrote that the view of the rivers cutting through the Blue Ridge was, in his words, one of the most stupendous scenes in nature, a scene he claimed worth a voyage across the Atlantic just to see. Harper's Ferry holds far more than scenery. It is the symbolic halfway point of the Appalachian Trail, the site of John Brown's famous abolitionist raid in 1859, a spark that helped ignite the American Civil War, and the home of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy itself. Far to the southwest lies another gateway, older than the United States itself. The Cumberland Gap, a natural pass through the Appalachian Mountains at the meeting point of Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. For thousands of years, this gap was used by Native American hunters and traders following the migration paths of buffalo herds. In 1775, the frontiersman Daniel Boone blazed the wilderness road through the gap. Over the next 35 years, more than 300,000 settlers passed through this single mountain notch as they pushed westward into Kentucky and beyond. It became the first great migration route into the American interior. Travelers today can hike to the Pinnacle Overlook, where the view stretches across 3 states at once. Inside the park lies the Gap Cave, a vast underground system carved into the mountain itself. The great gateways of Appalachia carried armies, settlers, traders, and dreamers. But high above them, in the wildest reaches of West Virginia, lies a landscape that feels as if it does not belong on Earth at all. In the highlands of eastern West Virginia, the mountains do something strange. They forget what they are. This is Dolly Sods, a 17,371-acre wilderness perched on a high plateau within the Monongahela National Forest. Most travelers who arrive here for the first time describe the same feeling. They report that the landscape looks impossible, as if a piece of Canadian tundra had been lifted across thousands of miles and dropped onto the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. And in a sense, that is exactly what happened. During the last ice age, the cold climate of Dolly Sods supported a sub-Arctic ecosystem more typical of central Canada. When the glaciers retreated and the climate warmed, the high elevation and exposed position of the plateau preserved these northern conditions long after they vanished from the rest of the range. Today, scientists describe Dolly Sods as a relict ecosystem, a living window into Ice Age Appalachia. The plateau itself sits at over 4,000 feet. Sweeping heath barrens stretch in every direction. Wind-sculpted spruce trees lean east, frozen permanently by the constant western gusts. Sphagnum bogs glow neon green in summer. Boulders the size of houses dot the open meadows. The name comes from a German immigrant family, the Dollies, who once grazed cattle on these high meadows. In Appalachian dialect, an open mountaintop meadow is called a sods. Over time, Dolly Sods became Dolly Sods. But the wilderness has a darker layer of history. During World War II, the United States Army used Dolly Sods as a live-fire artillery training ground. To this day, the Forest Service warns travelers that unexploded ordnance still remains buried in some of the meadows. Visitors are asked to stay on marked trails. In autumn, the entire plateau bursts into red, gold, and crimson. In winter, snow blankets the boulders and locks the bogs in silver ice. In every season, Dolly Sods feels like another planet. But the deepest river in the Appalachians flows still, and it carved one of the youngest national parks in America, out of one of the oldest rivers on Earth. The name is one of the strangest paradoxes in American geography. The New River. It is, in fact, one of the oldest rivers in the world. Geologists estimate that the new river has been flowing for somewhere between 10 and 360 million years. It is older than the Appalachian Mountains themselves, so old that as the range slowly rose around it, the river simply continued cutting straight through. The mountains grew, the river outlasted them. The New also defies the geography of North America in another way. It flows north, while almost every major river east of the Mississippi flows south. The New River cuts a path against the grain of the continent. Researchers believe this ancient northward flow is a clue to its great age, predating the very forces that shaped the landscape around it. Today, the river carves through one of the most stunning canyons in the eastern United States. The New River Gorge plunges more than 1,000 feet deep in places. In 2020, it was officially designated as America's 63rd national park, the newest national park in the country, set inside one of the oldest rivers on Earth. Spanning the canyon is the New River Gorge Bridge. At 876 feet above the river, it was once the highest steel arch bridge in the world. Every October, on Bridge Day, hundreds of base jumpers leap from the deck into the gorge below. It is the largest legal base jumping event in America. But the true treasure of the gorge is its biodiversity. Ecologists rank the New River Gorge in the top 5 most biodiverse national parks in America. Because the river flows north, it created a natural migration corridor for plants and animals during ancient climate shifts. The result is an ecosystem packed with rare species, some found nowhere else. Travelers come for the whitewater rafting, the rock climbing on Endless Wall, and the hidden waterfalls deep in the side canyons. Few realize they are standing in one of the oldest landscapes on the continent. But to truly grasp the scale of these mountains, travelers must look upward, to the highest point in the entire eastern United States. In the heart of western North Carolina, surrounded by the dense forests of the Black Mountains, rises a peak that holds a remarkable record. Mount Mitchell. At 6,684 feet, it is the highest mountain in the eastern United States, higher than any peak east of the Mississippi River, higher than the Smokies, higher than the White Mountains of New Hampshire. The climate near its summit feels nothing like the rest of the southern Appalachians. Researchers describe the top of Mount Mitchell as a sky island, a small isolated zone where conditions mirror those of central Canada, more than 1,000 miles to the north. Spruce and fir forests cover the upper slopes. Snow can fall any month of the year. Travelers report standing in midsummer fog so cold their breath fogs the air. The mountain is named for a man who died proving its height. In 1835, a professor at the University of North Carolina named Elisha Mitchell measured the peak and declared it the highest in the eastern United States. His claim was disputed for years. In 1857, at age 64, Mitchell returned to the mountain to gather additional evidence and silence his critics. While descending a waterfall on the slopes, he slipped, fell, and died. Today, Mitchell is buried at the summit of the mountain that bears his name. His grave sits inside a quiet stone enclosure, surrounded by Canadian-style forest, at the very top of the eastern United States. Mount Mitchell sits inside the oldest state park in North Carolina, established in 1915. A paved road climbs nearly to the summit, allowing every visitor to reach the observation deck. From the top, on clear days, the view stretches across more than 85 miles of Appalachian ridges, fading into endless blue horizons. But the summit also tells a more troubling story. Decades of acid rain damaged the spruce fir forest of Mount Mitchell so severely that scientists once feared the entire ecosystem might collapse. Conservation efforts have helped the forest slowly recover. But the most enduring magic of these mountains is not found on their peaks. It lives in the people who never left, and in the music that still rises from these ancient hills. The Appalachians are old, but they are not silent. For nearly 3 centuries, these mountains have shaped one of the most distinct cultures in the United States, a culture born from the meeting of 3 peoples, Scotch-Irish immigrants, who arrived in the 1700s with their fiddles and ballads, Africans, whose banjos and rhythms became the heartbeat of mountain music, and Cherokee, whose ancestral land cradled it all. In these isolated hollows, that fusion gave rise to something entirely new: old-time music, bluegrass, the roots of country and Americana. Folklorists have traced specific Appalachian songs back to 17th century Scottish ballads, kept alive by mountain families long after the originals had been forgotten in Europe. At the cultural heart of the southern Appalachians lies Asheville, North Carolina, a city of fewer than 100,000 people that draws more than 12 million visitors each year. Travelers describe it as the gateway to mountain culture. Craft breweries fill the historic downtown. Galleries line the streets. The famous Folk Art Center along the Blue Ridge Parkway showcases generations of mountain craftsmanship, from quilts to wood carvings to traditional pottery. Just outside Asheville stands one of the most extraordinary homes in America, the Biltmore Estate. Built in 1895 by George Washington Vanderbilt, it remains the largest privately owned home in the United States. Over 175,000 square feet, 250 rooms, surrounded by 8,000 acres of grounds originally designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, the same landscape architect who designed New York's Central Park. But the deepest soul of Appalachia is not found in mansions. It is found on front porches, in small mountain towns, in jam sessions where banjos and fiddles still play tunes older than the United States itself. Travelers who visit places like Galax, Virginia, or Asheville's Shindy on the Green hear something extraordinary: a living musical tradition, still passed from generation to generation in the same valleys where it was born. But the deepest story of these mountains reaches even further, across an ocean, across continents, to a time when the Appalachians stood beside mountains that today rise on the other side of the world. To understand the Appalachians fully, travelers must look at a map that no longer exists. Roughly 300 million years ago, the continents of Earth collided into a single supercontinent called Pangaea. Africa pressed into North America, Europe folded into both. The collision pushed up an enormous mountain chain that ran for thousands of miles across the heart of this unified landmass. The Appalachians were part of that chain. Then, about 200 million years ago, Pangaea began to break apart. The continents drifted in opposite directions, the Atlantic Ocean opened between them, and the original mountain chain shattered into pieces. The pieces still exist. The Atlas Mountains of Morocco, the Scottish Highlands, the mountains of Scandinavia, and the Appalachians of North America. Geologists have confirmed through rock samples, fossil records, and tectonic mapping that these mountain ranges were once one. They are siblings, separated by an ocean. In rural Newfoundland, in Scotland, in Morocco, and in the hollows of West Virginia, travelers report standing on rocks that are geologically identical, granite that formed in the same eruption, sedimentary layers laid down in the same prehistoric sea. The Appalachians are not just the oldest mountains in North America, they are the surviving remnant of a vanished world. What seems quiet today was once one of the great mountain chains of the planet. A chain that reached across what would become 4 continents. A chain so vast that the trees, the rivers, the species themselves migrated and diverged along its slopes. Some of the wildflowers that bloom each spring in the Smokies have close relatives still growing in the Scottish Highlands. Some of the salamanders of West Virginia are kin to species that exist nowhere else but Morocco. The Appalachians did not just hide a few small mysteries, they hide the memory of an Earth almost no one alive today can imagine. The blue mist rises again at dawn. It drifts through the valleys of the Smokies, over the silent meadows of Cades Cove, across the high balds of Rowan Mountain, through the great gateways of Harper's Ferry and Cumberland Gap, above the hidden ridge where the Melungeons once lived in silence, down into the dark waters of the Lost Sea, over the rim of Linville Gorge, across the windswept tundra of Dolly Sods, through the endless canyon of the New River, to the summit of Mount Mitchell, where Elisha Mitchell lies sleeping in stone. And beneath it all, the mountains themselves, older than dinosaurs, older than trees, older than bones. The Appalachians do not shout their wonders. They breathe them, slowly, patiently, the way only something truly ancient can. Travelers come for the views, for the trails, for the music drifting from a porch on a summer night. But what they take with them, often without realizing it, is something far older, a sense of time, a sense of scale, a reminder that the Earth itself has memory. And these quiet, weathered blue mist mountains, these mountains remember everything.